People often wonder how they can get inside the mind of current elected officials on how their budget comes together, how they balance needs versus wants, and how Nebraskans can most impactfully engage in the budgeting process. We have assembled elected officials and staff at various levels of government from across the state to offer insight on all of these questions and more. So with that, please welcome our moderator, who has represented District 10 in Northwest Omaha for the last 7 years, the Honorable Wendy DeBoer. And our panelists, the Honorable Eric Garcia-Mendez, Board of Education, Grand Island Public Schools. The Honorable Don Rowe, District 5 City Councilman of the Omaha City Council. And Kenny Zoeller, Director of Policy and Research for Governor Jim Pillen.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. Why don't we start and have our panelists introduce themselves first. We'll start down there with Kenny. Would you just take a moment to introduce yourself and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So hi, everyone. My name is Kenny Zoeller. I have the honor to serve as Governor Pillen's director of his Policy Research Office. What that essentially means is my office, which has a team of 6, we interact with all of our state agencies and are the go-between between the governor, our state agencies, and the legislature, and we try to lobby the legislature on behalf of the governor to effectuate his policy preferences. I'm 34 years old. I'm originally from Houston, Texas. Came to Nebraska by way of Concordia University in Seward. Had a mentor in college to kind of piggy off the last panel. If you're not mentoring a young person, that's the best thing that you can do. I was mentored in 2010 to 2012 when I was in college by Levon Heidemann, who was appropriations chair. He just brought me in, sat me down in the appropriations committee. I got to learn a whole hell of a lot of things. It was amazing experience. From there, worked on Governor Ricketts' campaign in 2014, worked in the legislature, and then had a variety of different jobs. As a good millennial, I couldn't keep a job for more than 2 years. So, and then ran the governor's campaign in 2022, and now get to serve the people of Nebraska in my current role.
Good afternoon. My name is Don Rowe. I am serving on the Omaha City Council. Just was reelected to our 2nd term this spring, thanks to Derek and Matthew's help. We got that done, although I will tell you, running unopposed made their job pretty easy. I'm an Omaha native and probably a little bit north of 34, but maybe south of Merv Reapy, I'm not sure. But Omaha native, and my career has been in the lumber industry. I've worked in the lumber industry down here in Lincoln, and then also in Omaha with Millard Lumber. I've been with them for almost 30 years, and kind of wanted to wind down that career and was looking for another opportunity. I knew that I didn't want to quit work, and I still haven't. I still go into the office every day, but I wanted to have a different challenge, and Millard Lumber was very kind and said, hey, we started talking about this opportunity with the District 5, which is the southwest part of town in Millard. And so we've made a determination to run for election in 21 and had 7 competitors in the race in the primary, and we're fortunate to win. And so I've been serving there. I'm in my 5th year and having a great time. It's interesting in this job. It's a customer service job. And so you're dealing with people's trying to navigate the city and trying to get things done. And so one day I might be dealing with a tree limb that's overhanging the street, or a tree that's a dead tree in the right-of-way behind somebody's house. And the next day I'm approving the purchase of a $3 million helicopter for Omaha Police Department. So it's a wide range of topics that we need to know and to be informed about. But it is a great job. It's fun to serve.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Eric Garcia-Mendez. I hail from Grand Island, Nebraska, just as Danielle and a couple of other folks here in this room. Really, I am very new to the political landscape of Nebraska. I decided to run in 2022. After encouragement, I'm sure a lot of you can familiarize with this, but after encouragement from like friends and family, and I had a lot of time in my hand. Like I don't have a partner or any kids, but I do have nephews that are part of the school district of Grand Island, so have some proximity. But I also graduated in 2014 from that same school district. Found myself in Grand Island, was employed through the local United Way. And you know, United Ways, they do annual campaigns. They're very connected to the community. I got that sense of belonging in my community, and I was like, what the heck? I'll just run for office. Let's see what happens. Knocked on some doors, got elected, and then now I found myself here 3 years later. And so it's been an honor just to serve as a school board member, because I believe I still have some proximity to some of those school years that I was at Gish, Grand Island Public Schools, graduated in 2014. So not too far away from that graduation year. And I had that experience of going through the school district since very early on, of kindergarten all the way through senior high year. And so, yeah, I am just like super appreciative for being here too. And then do work across the state of Nebraska in my own kind of professional capacity as like a welcoming coordinator with the Nebraska's Home program with Nebraska Appleseed. And so that's really getting connected to local communities, like a couple of people here. How do we become more welcoming and inclusive as a community when we find people that are different than us, than how we grew up, right? A lot of times it's extending that hand and helping them out with yard work, or having that smile on your face when they walk into the Dollar General, right? And so, yeah, that's just a little bit about me. And yeah.
Thank you all. So now I'd like for each of you to give us kind of a brief, and may I emphasize, Kenny, brief overview of the budget process in your level of government. So what time of year does it start and end? Who all's involved? Just a very brief overview of the budget process.
Very brief. Okay, got it. So our budget process in the state of Nebraska is outlined within our state constitution in two separate areas. The governor has a constitutional role, and then most importantly, the legislature has a constitutional role to appropriate. From the governor's standpoint, everything is set from the state of the state, which is actually in our constitution, a budget presentation is what that functionally is meant to be. So that is in January, and in Article 5, Section 7, in odd years, it's January 15th. If a governor is elected, and that is their first year, that gets moved back to February 1st. Our budget process in the executive branch side starts in the middle of July. That's when our Department of Administrative Services, with our budget division, publishes instructions to all state entities and divisions of government. From July to September, we at the staff level work with a variety of different departments. And then from September to December, we're working with the governor to go program by program of all $19 billion of expenditures within the state budget, to get decisions from him before we then present it to the legislature and hand off the budget for them for consideration. Was that brief enough, hopefully? Yeah. No.
So at the city of Omaha, a city of our size, we have what's called a strong mayor form of government. So the mayor really starts working on the budget January 1st. It's an extensive budget. We have less zeros than what the state has, but it's still a pretty sizable amount of money to budget and to allocate. And so I'm sure that Mayor Ewing has already started on the next year budget as well. So we are presented, the mayor presents the budget to the city council about the third week of July. And then we have a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks to review it and take a look at it. We can submit questions to the department heads. He has 11 department heads that he works with on a day-to-day basis to formulate that budget, to allocate those resources. And so they submit that to us in July. And then toward the middle of August, we have an opportunity to have a meeting with each of those department heads and to ask questions. And we could submit questions prior, just to make sure we understand what the dollars are going to be used for. And then that same night, we have a public hearing. The public is invited to come to hear and to recommend to us what they would like to see in the budget. And that's how that works. And then, a couple of weeks later, it's, After it's been kind of tweaked, if there's any adjustments to be made, it's presented to the city council for a vote, and then we vote yes or no. And then a couple weeks later, like just this last Tuesday, day before yesterday, we voted to set the levy. So we looked at the amount of dollars that were coming in, determined what the levy would need to be, and then we set the levy, and then they start all over again.
And
Yeah.
Eric?
Yeah, so our process is very similar. One fun fact, public schools and don't set the valuations of a public like property, right? And so a lot of times that's a confusion that some people have, but we have no say in terms of what valuations look like, but we do have a say of like, what does the levy look like in terms of how much do public schools then use up, right? And so our budget year really starts September 1st all the way to August 31st in the school year. So September is a very busy year for our administrators at the public school level, along with board members, because as board members, we have to have a workshop and a public hearing, both public. And so having the public an opportunity to come and hear what does the budget look like for this upcoming year, and what are the priorities for the local administration in terms of public schools. Maybe some of you are familiar with this term, but like local control is a huge issue slash like something that we try to push in terms of having our state legislators understand is that public schools, city councils, right, we understand our local needs of our community are the most, right? And so I think a lot of school board members are elected locally through peers in their community. And so then we are then entrusted into developing the budget alongside administrators. So that local control is really important to us. And we always try to advocate that at the state level with peers here in this room. And we get the best decisions made for our students and our community at that local control. And so just to add a little bit more information about the budget, our administrators really start working on the budget probably earlier in the year around the springtime. As soon as they start to see what are enrollment trends, because we have a period in where we have people start enrolling for the next school year. So for instance, for this 25-26 school year, there was a March deadline, March 31st deadline, when parents had to register their kids into school. And then from there, the district really looks at, okay, what are the needs? What are the numbers of students that we need? And then also, what are the salaries, right? What are the pay that we're wanting to give to our educators in order for them to stay in the district, right? Teacher shortage is a huge thing, and administrator shortage is also a thing, if you don't know. But it's also tough finding administrators out there to make sure that we're doing everything effectively and we're doing the reporting out that the state expects us to, right, in terms of state testing and all of those metrics that we have to report back to the state. So a lot of this it's kind of I think it's a whole year long process, basically. Mm-hmm. You have like a couple months off where your administrators, your CFOs like get to rest. But it's really just a cognizant thing that we always are working on. And in terms of the board, our fiduciary responsibility is really like asking those questions of like, do we have enough money in order to meet the needs of our students, of our community, of our teachers, our educators, and our support staff? Because a lot of the times it's not just educators, but I consider custodians, those lunch employees, right, in the lunch line, equally as educators as much as those in the classroom, because they all impact and work in relationship with a lot of our students in the school district. So yeah, long story short, September to August 31st. But really, it's a whole community-wide effort in terms of principals, admin, superintendent getting together and coordinating. Hey, what do the numbers look like? What are the trends in terms of what needs we need, and maybe wants that we can fit in there?
Okay. With regard to budgets specifically, was there anything in particular that surprised you when you took office or were appointed? Was there anything in specific? And let's start with Eric this time. We'll change it up a little bit. Eric,
Yeah.
was there anything that surprised you when you took office?
Yeah, two kind of major things. One of the things is, well, maybe three. September is a busy is a busy month. We had like three different board gatherings in just over the past 2 or 3 weeks. It's budget month for us, but about 80% of our expenditures of what we spend in the public schools, Grand Island Public Schools, goes back to personnel. So that's like a huge amount of our budget, as it should be, right? Because we have teachers, support staff, like I was just telling you all, and that takes about 80% of our budget. So when you think about what flexibility we have in terms of our budget, we don't have a lot of flexibility for funds, right? In for instances, right, when COVID-19 happened and we had to find money, right, to help with some of these other with class sizes, masks, and stuff like that. So we really do function with a limited capacity in terms of where we can move funds. Another thing is just that there's multiple different funds at the public schools. There's like a special buildings fund, right, that we can't use to like pay teachers, but that specific fund is only meant for like buildings. And now recently, thanks to like the legislature at state level, we could use those special building funds for like security measures and some stuff like that. Like we were just talking about earlier, just keeping our school environment safe from intruders and anything else like that. So that was really appreciative. But yeah, I'd say kind of those two things is sometimes we can't really use the funds for a variety of different things, but they're specialized.
And Don?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest surprise was the amount of really fixed costs there are. You know, our number one goal is to make sure that our people are safe. We want to have a quick, response from the police department when we need them. We want to have a quick response from the fire department. We've got, other payroll expenses, and that's a large percentage of the budget. And then the next largest part, and maybe larger, is the public works piece. You know, we all want streets that are drivable, and I hear a lot of complaints about that. You hear complaints about, potholes, but then we hear complaints about, construction zones as well. So kind of a catch-22 there. But I think the biggest thing is it's really about managing the expenses. The revenues are pretty much set. We have several tax revenue sources, and property tax is one of them. But we also rely on sales tax, which is actually a bigger number than the property tax contribution, and then restaurant tax, and then we have fees and building permit fees and those kind of things that come in. But the real job for the mayor and the department heads is to manage the expenses, and it's a tough job because there's so many of those expenses are pretty much fixed, and there's not much negotiation in that.
Kenny?
Yeah, I would say in my time working in state government, and I think you two are kind of highlighting this as well, there's not actually a line item in our state budget that says waste. So I think that's kind of one of the biggest things that was maybe a little bit most surprising. But why I bring that up is every single item within our budget from the state perspective has been advocated for by either a previous governor or a state senator, right? And those state senators oftentimes are supported by either nonprofit groups like Open Sky or other types of interests. So anytime that we, from the governor's perspective, are taking a look at either right-sizing programs or making cuts, that comes oftentimes with the battle, right? We have to come with justifications as to why we are doing that, because state taxpayer dollars, all taxpayer dollars are very, very important, and elected officials ranging from school boards all the way up to the governor treat those with the utmost importance. So I think, frankly, the most surprising thing when I first entered into this line of work in 2010 was just how hard it is to make sure that you're either right-sizing programs or shifting funds to other types of things that are important for at least the elected officials I've worked for.
Thank you all for that. How do you distinguish between wants and needs when it comes to investments reflected in the budget? Don, let's start with you on that one.
Wants versus the needs. I think for me, as I mentioned a little bit ago, it's about understanding what our role is and how important it is that we make sure our people are safe and that they are receiving the services that they require. You know, we want to make sure that the garbage is picked up every week. We want to make sure that the parks are mowed. We want to make sure that the police respond and that the fire department is well equipped. And then there's the pieces that are a little bit more flexible. That's where you have an opportunity to make decisions on what's really important to maybe your constituents. And so I try to rely on what I'm hearing from my neighbors. You know, what's important to them? What is it that they want to see from their local government, and then make decisions based on that. But again, it's a strong mayor form of government. So a lot of those decisions are made at that level, and then we just approve or maybe push back on it. But we do have opportunities for input for sure.
Eric, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd say when I think about like needs, it's some of that sustainability pieces, right? Like not starting a program and we don't know if we're going to have funding for that program here in like a year, 2 years, or 3 years, right? I think one of the things that we successfully did in Grand Island was provide free school breakfast and lunch to all of our students, regardless of income. And that was done through like a federal program. We're not sure if that's going to be able to be extended here and when we're up for it again in 3 or 4 years. But that's one of the things that we looked at, and we're like, we have the money to do that. And we know that if our children are fed, they learn a lot better. And so their outcomes are a lot better. And so that's one of the things that we kind of try to distinguish is whatever we're going to spend money on, is it keeping kids in the classroom? Is it keeping kids learning, right? Because if we get the kids to go to school, they'll learn, right? And so I think another thing is just safety. So like building maintenance, kind of those things. Once is like, yeah, like sometimes we have to close a school that has like a low capacity or like low students that are going to it. And we have to make the fiduciary responsibility of like looking at the numbers and looking at the expenses that will be incurred if we continue to open that building and not just kind of cut ties with it, right? And so those are the tough decisions that we have to like think about. It doesn't always make us the most popular people, but I think we get elected in there to do the most ethical, responsible thing with taxpayers' money, right? And so sometimes it's like making decisions that might anger like a couple of people, but it's also in the fiscally responsible thing to do for our whole community and school district. So it really also just depends on the local needs and wants of a community. I think a lot of times, right, like that local control and like people in Grand Island know more about their community than like people in Lincoln, right? And so it's like, I'm not going to be coming here to Lincoln and like, hey, Lincoln, do this, right? Like y'all know your community a lot better than I do. So like, you know how to do it. So that's another thing about local control. But I'd say it's really just depends. What are the goals for that school district and how can you make sure that the budget aligns with those goals?
Okay.
Yep.
Kenny?
Yeah, I think wants versus needs, and I'm not an elected official, but I have the opportunity to work for one. Those are frankly determined by the voters every 2 years or 4 years. So in our system at the state, from the governor's perspective, when he ran in 2022, he ran on 4 words: kids, taxes, agriculture, values. Kids, we need to invest in our kids, make sure we're creating a 21st century workforce. Taxes, realize that we're a high tax state and we need to control spending to lower taxes, whether it be property taxes or income taxes. Agriculture, it's our number one industry. We need to be investing in making sure we have economic development in agriculture. And then values. We're a conservative state. We need to make sure that we're defending our conservative values and promoting them. But you know, the governor's mandate that he received in 2022 from the voters probably is separate from Senator DeBoer's mandate that she received from her district and her voters, right? When she was elected and reelected. So the wants versus needs, as I said before, it is dictated by you, the citizens, through your elected officials. And our unique system of government with the legislature is far different than all 49 other states. where every single elected senator, all 49 of them, have a shared role in crafting our budget and working alongside with the various different state elected officials, whether it be the governor or others, in kind of determining and try to sift through the tea leaves of seeing what all the needs are that all of Senator DeBoer or the governor were elected to do.
Thank you. That kind of brings me sort of to the next one then, which is when and how are the best ways for people to be, for the public to be involved in decision-making in the budget, to affect budget decisions? Do you have advice for people who are looking to engage for the first time in that? So what's the best practices for getting involved in budget-making decisions?
You want me to start that?
Go ahead.
I'll be glad to. So I think, as I said, the budget process for the city is really, I'm sure, a year-long process. And so the earlier that a person can get engaged and express their opinion and talk about that is the better. To get involved in it early in the process and let your wishes be known. The department heads are very key in influencing the mayor as to what the needs are in the community. So the parks director is going to have an agenda, and they're going to express their agenda to the mayor and say, you know what, I need this many dollars to function properly and to have the proper equipment. And then the police chief's going to be, in the next half-hour conversation, and Chief Bossman's going to be there for the fire department. But they listen to the constituents as well, so they understand. They're on the streets and they're in the grocery stores, and they hear from you and from me as well as to what our needs are. And I think that's the best way to communicate your experience. And then the public hearings. So when we have an opportunity, it surprises me sometimes, as many emails as I get, the lack of people that will show up to actually the public hearing and voice their opinion. It's usually a very small number of people that are really passionate and will take the time to come express their opinion. So I think when you do that also works. But each of us, the 7 of us, I didn't mention it, but the city of Omaha is split up into 7 districts. So there's 7 council members, and we all get emails and input and advice every day. And we try to respond to those emails and those communications, whether it be an email or a phone call or a postcard, whatever. And I think that's the best way to communicate what your feelings are.
Yeah, I guess I could go next. I'd say it's flawed, right? I mean, like we expect people to go to like a workshop, I'll be guilty of that, where I'm like sitting around the whatever you call it, where we're all gathering and we're like, we see nobody out in the crowd for public comment. But also it's like people are working and people are struggling, and sometimes they can't come, right? And speak their mind, right? So I think that's where it's a little bit of like, I think just making sure that we're being proactive and being out there in the community and reaching like the Rotary group or a local leadership program, and like making sure that we're having our school district officials like out there, like connecting with individuals, really bringing people the knowledge, right? So sometimes we expect people to come to us, which we're always an open book, right? For some individuals, it's like, just send us an email, and also just start with like a basic question, like, what are all the different funds that the public schools have to manage? And like just being curious about that. I think just sometimes people don't know that you could just call us up or email us, and then we'll be happy to connect to the right individuals if we don't have the correct info. But I think it's also being proactive and being out in the community and getting connected to community members and having proximity to the community that you're there serving, right? And so it's a little clear as mud of like how to get involved. But I'd say there's always opportunity for open comment. Their email is always available. I think we're always like reachable in those ways. But also we should be out there in community too, like at like different community gatherings, making sure that we're spreading that information, like, hey, if you have any questions about the budget, we're always an open book and we can connect you to the right people. So it's a little bit of both. Yeah.
Personally, I think the most important time to get involved, to have the highest amount of influence is frankly during an election, right? If you think of our system of government, we're represented in the form of government, we're answerable to the people. Free and open elections is what provides the legitimacy for actions that the governor or state senators take. So talking to candidates when they're running, getting to know them, talk to them at their door when they're knocking your door, that's the highest opportunity or best opportunity for citizens to have impact, because after an election, and as I mentioned before, that creates a mandate and that creates a governing trajectory, right, for either the legislature or the governor. Past that point, however, there's ample opportunities within our system of government, state government, to be involved from a citizenry level. Every single bill that's introduced in front of the legislature has a public hearing. And in fact, over the past 5 years, frankly, the legislature has done a great job opening up options to comment on those bills. When I first started working in and around the legislature, you had to physically be in front of the committee. Now that's no longer the case. And the budget's no different. I guess the only difference with the budget bills is instead of having one singular day, it seems like it's 50 days. But there's ample amounts of opportunity to either testify in person or contact your representatives, contact the governor's office in terms of your thoughts and input. But as I mentioned before, being a part of the electoral process, frankly, is the best time and opportunity to be engaged.
Thank you so much, all of you. So let me ask each of you an individual question now. For Eric, there's been a lot of shifting with state funding of our public schools, which certainly has had an impact on the way school board members approach budgets. Can you tell us more about that and the impact it's had? And has it been challenging for Grand Island?
Yeah, I think short answer, yeah. And I think it's that uncertainty. I think as we're seeing now with our state budget, I think school budgets are very, very, very much the same of like, we don't know what the state will give us like next year. So we got to work within those parameters, right? Of like, these are our current needs and this is what we need to do, right? In order to meet those needs. So a lot of times there's uncertainty. There's absolutely uncertainty. And then I think also we've thankfully have seen an increase in state funding for some of our education, right? It's probably not like at the level that I think you're going to satisfy like everybody, right? But I think it signals something, especially to local school districts, that hey, like yeah, we're actually getting some more funding from the state. Like we're super appreciative of that. But then also like we need some more of like this or that. So I think just that open dialogue that I've been seeing more from the state level to this local school district level is something that I think a lot of people are appreciative of. And then just like valuations increase, then we have to like see like maybe we should not be asking for all of this money, right? And decrease the amount of the levy. And so I think just being cognizant of some of those things is something that we're always looking at. But I'd say there's always an uncertainty for sure. And that's something that concerns a lot of people, right? But I think making sure that we're having open dialogue and being respectful to one another and just knowing like, hey, this is what we need, or this would be really good if we can shift this here and that way. I think it's something that I think everyone can come to an agreement that we just need to have open dialogue.
And Don, the Omaha City Council has a small pot of money for each council member to invest in a project or program in their district to enhance the community. Can you talk about what you've used some of your discretionary funds for?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. The budget, the general fund budget in the city of Omaha is about $560 million. That's kind of the day-to-day expenses of the city. Now, when you go all in with all of the streets and capital improvements and that, it's about $1.8 billion. So it's a significant amount of money. The Mayor Stothert, several years ago, put a policy in place where she carved out $350,000 at budget time. And so she came to each of the city council members, there's 7 of us, and said, you have $50,000 to work with, during this budget. How would you invest it in your district what's a project that would make a difference to your neighbors in your district? And I had a couple of moms come to me a few years ago that had a vision for an inclusive playground at Lake Zurinsky. And they came to my office downtown and they kind of pitched the idea and talked about how they were working with philanthropy and they were going to need to raise about, I don't know, in excess of $1 million to put this playground together. And one of the moms had a young son that was kind of mobility challenged. He just couldn't play at the normal playground with his brother or sisters or friends. So she and a friend had a vision for this inclusive playground, and they didn't really ask me for anything. They just wanted me to know it was something that they were working on because that park is in my district. It's just a 9-iron from my house. And so when it came time for the budget, I knew that they were stressing, they were pushing, they were at the final hour, and I thought, well, you know what? I think I'm gonna commit and allocate that $50,000 just as an encouragement to them. Not that it really moved the dial on the project, but it encouraged them to make the next phone call, to see that project through. And it took about 7 years from start to finish. But that playground is open today, and it's wildly successful. I've gone through that park at numerous times of the day and the week, and it is crowded with kids, and they're having a great time. And so I felt like that was the project that, I had a little piece of, the city had a little bit of a piece of, the Parks Department had a bigger piece, but it was one that we could help push through to the finish line, and it was well received by the community.
It's a cool park. I've seen it.
It is very cool.
Thank you. And Kenny, the media has widely covered an upcoming fiscal challenge for the Nebraska legislature due to a number of factors. And Governor Pillen has signaled intent to cut spending across the board. Can you give us some insight into your office's approach to this, what's happening now, and maybe give us a rough timeline as to what will be happening before the next legislative session, and what recommendations might you make to the legislature when we convene in January?
All right, there's a lot in there, so I'll try to answer it as best I can. But first, I wanted to go over a little bit of history in terms of our general fund receipts, and maybe provide a better table set in terms of why the governor feels the need to take, frankly, historic action. The goal that he set out is $500 million in general fund, a decrease in general fund expenditures. If you take a look 30 years ago, so 1996, the state of Nebraska, through our main funding source, which is general funds, so that's corporate income tax, individual income tax, and sales tax, we collected roughly $2 billion in general fund receipts. It then took us 8 years to go from $2 billion to $3 billion. It took us 8 years to go from $3 billion to $4 billion. And then it took us 8 years to go from $4 billion to $5 billion. But then something happens, and that something was COVID. And then it took us 1 year to go from $5 billion in general fund receipts to $6 billion, and then 2 years to go from $7 billion in general fund receipts, $6 billion from general fund receipts to $7 billion. So there's been a tremendous amount of change within how our state is funded and the amount in which we're funded. When the governor took office in fiscal year 23-24, we sped up a number of tax cut reductions that were previously passed by the legislature, and then also proposed more tax cuts because this data that I just laid out showed the governor that we are taxed too high. We're a high tax state within the state of Nebraska. And frankly, we've been hovering right around the $6 billion general fund net receipts amount. So the question is, frankly, why does the governor feel the need to put forward this historic amount of cuts? And the reason is we have a tremendous amount of challenges that we have to address now. First and foremost is we have to continue to cut property taxes within the state of Nebraska. But then also we have significant 21st century challenges, as was highlighted before in the previous panel, in terms of how do we retain young people. We need to be providing more financial flexibility at the state level to invest in other programs. And then third, we have an emerging power crisis in this country, in America. That is something that the state's going to have to be involved in further, in making sure that we're able to provide power not only to homeowners, but frankly businesses that in some instances are unable to get generation that would provide hundreds of jobs in the state of Nebraska for 5 to 8 years. That's unacceptable, right? We have to make sure that we have power supply and capacity to address that. So how are we going to do that? Well, the governor and his team and myself and all of us, we're taking a look at targeted cuts. First and foremost, we want to be able to leverage federal funds and cash funds in instances where we're already, where we may have general fund expenditures. An example of this, 2 years ago, Senator Jacobson, along with the legislature, passed LB 1087. That was what was colloquially called a hospital assessment program. For some reason, the state of Nebraska passed on this program where 42 other states opted into it. We finally got approval from CMS in June. And what that essentially does is that's going to provide $1 billion more in federal funds to our hospitals through our Medicaid program. And that also allows the state an additional $35 million in savings that we would have, that we can reduce general fund expenditures from the federal government. So we're taking a look at every opportunity. The governor's taking a look at every opportunity to further leverage federal funds and offsetting general fund expenditures. And additionally, we have to be doing business differently. So the governor has charged his agencies to come up with additional budget efficiencies, one of which that we've highlighted that we will be presenting to the legislature is taking a look at our age and disabled waiver. There's an example where we state taxpayers, we're paying $300,000 a year to keep certain individuals in their own home rather than working with them to provide better care in nursing homes. We feel like it's a win-win to make sure that we're funding nursing homes at a higher level, but also at the same time providing better care for the patient at a cheaper cost for the taxpayer. So there's a number of items that the governor's going to be presenting through a variety of different means to get to that $500 million number. It's going to include items that I mentioned before, but then also taking a look at our tax credit programs, trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work. And we have to do this because the challenges that we are facing as a state, we need more financial flexibility to address those challenges. And the governor clearly ran in 2022 on making sure that we have property tax relief, growing the economy, and retaining young people. And by having these targeted cuts, the governor feels like we're going to be able to accomplish those goals in redirecting those funding, that $500 million to other purposes that we believe Nebraskans want, such as property tax relief.
Okay, those are the questions I have. I think now we're going to take some questions from all of you for our panelists.
This is, I think, perhaps the most important question. What are some concrete and effective ways that your constituents can get involved in the process of having their voice heard in your respective budget planning?
Well, for me, the best communication that I receive is through an email, because then I have something I can keep track of and respond to as quickly as possible. But I think that's the best communication form for me, is to have people, the budget comes out, like I said, in July, and it's accessible to anybody. It's a document that's about 2.5 inches thick. And you can find every piece of detail in there that you would ever want to know. And so if people want to engage and get into that level, I can certainly help people understand how that budget works and get answers for them. But I think through email and would be the easiest way for people to get engaged right away in the early in the process, which is in July.
So I'd say kind of equal the same. Just be curious. Ask those people that are in elected positions, but also ask your local school district CFOs. Hey, what does the budget look like? Right? How do you do the budget? I'm sure they will love to talk your ear off. Yeah.
Just to piggyback off of what was previously said, send emails, send communications. I can tell you personally, I have the opportunity to talk to a lot of state senators. They are tallying up how many people are emailing them. Like, they're very aware of it. The governor's very aware of it. He's always asking, hey, how many constituents have either called or emailed on this specific issue? So that type of engagement does matter. But back to the question that was previously posed, and I know it kind of sound like a broken record, but Get involved electorally. Go reach out to a candidate that you may support. Talk to them, have coffee with them, knock doors for them. That is, frankly, the best way. Engage in democracy that way to have an impact through the budget process.